Mr. Lewison.
So I rise in support of this bill, which updates the regime governing mobility vehicles and introduces a new registration requirement for certain PMDs. Mobility vehicles are sustainable alternatives that have evolved to meet the transport needs of an urban environment. When used responsibly and safely, they provide greater convenience, promote public transportation by providing first and last mile connections, and are themselves a form of recreation. How the different users navigate and share public space in land-scarce Singapore can be a significant source of friction. Mobility vehicles are perceived as competing with pedestrians for space and posing threats to pedestrian safety. My residents regularly provide feedback about these dangers and want the government to do more to protect residents and pedestrians. My residents also regularly see me when they get fined and say the government is enforcing too much and need to relax a bit when it comes to mobility vehicles. They feel there are too many restrictions. We need to find a middle ground. As Gavin Chan highlighted to me on Facebook, we should think about longer-term social norms. We want to inculcate for public path and road use, while addressing short-term pain points through legislative reforms and refinements. This should be done with the participation of all users. To this end, I note and welcome incremental, consultative, and education-based approach the government is taking in its regulation of mobility devices. Many of these amendments are based on observations from the implementations of the AMA, which came into effect this year. The AMA panel has also been very active, just recently releasing their second recommendation report. I am thus supportive of these amendments, which are based on extensive consultations, and I have just a number of clarifications to make. I have some clarifications on the scope and implementation of the PMD registration requirement under the new Part 3A. Firstly, can the Minister clarify whether the provisions relating to the registration contemplates a corporate body or company being an owner of a PMD on the register? Would it be possible, for instance, for a food delivery company to own a fleet of PMDs? Next, can the Minister clarify whether there is an obligation on the registered responsible person to update the register upon a change of ownership or when the PMD ceases to be used? Further, can the authority refuse registration of a PMD on the basis that the applicant had previously been convicted of mobility vehicle-related offences? I also understand that the obligations of an owner of a PMD or PAB continue even after cancelling their registration, as the person last registered will be treated as the owner under the definition of owner cancelling the registration. Next, enforcement powers under Section 41, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48 and 50 have been extended to outsourced enforcement officers. Can the Minister clarify whether enforcement powers exercised by these outsourced enforcement officers, public path wardens and volunteer path wardens are public powers that will be similarly amenable to judicial review? Next, Clause 27 amends the current Section 53(2) of the Active Mobility Act to remove the requirement to make reasonable inquiry to locate the owner of a vehicle before disposing it. Can the Minister clarify the rationale for removing this requirement? Has this requirement been proven to be too onerous for LTA? Given the new registration requirement for PMDs, it would surely be easier of disposal now conferred to outsourced enforcement officers under the new Section 50 of the AMA. Lastly, Clause 3 amends Section 18 of the AMA, which includes the use of PMDs on footpaths. I support these amendments. Last year, Minister Kaur responded to a PQ stating that footpaths in Singapore are wide enough to accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists at the same time. He stated that most of the country's footpaths are at least 1.5 meters wide, while footpaths near town centres and MRT stations are generally wider, between 2.4 and 3.6 meters. In his response, Minister considered that such width is sufficient to accommodate both pedestrian and cyclists. Given that mobility devices are now permitted to be up to a width of 0.7 meters, this leaves barely enough space when two mobility devices pass each other on a footpath that is 1.5 meters. It leaves about 0.1 meters. Thus, beyond these amendments, is the Ministry reviewing the minimum width of and mobility vehicles? Sir, clarifications notwithstanding, I stand in support of this bill and their wider efforts to promote harmonious and safe use of our public path by all.